The metallic clang of a wrench hitting concrete echoed through Jimmy's auto shop, sharp and sudden like a rifle shot. Jack Mercer froze, his weathered hands gripping the hood of a rusted Chevy pickup. For 3 heartbeats, he wasn't in the garage anymore. He was crouched behind a burned-out Humvee in Kandahar, watching smoke rise from the horizon while his sergeant's voice crackled through static. Contact left. Contact left. The spell broke when Jimmy Martinez called out from across the shop. "You okay over there, Jack?" Jack blinked, his pulse still hammering against his ribs. "Yeah, just dropped something." He picked up the wrench, forcing his breathing to steady. This was Millbrook, Pennsylvania, population 8,400. Not Afghanistan, not anymore. The morning sun slanted through the grimy windows of the shop, casting long shadows across oil-stained concrete. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Jack had been working here for 2 years now, ever since he'd moved back to his hometown with Liam. The work was honest, quiet, predictable. 3 things his life had desperately needed after the chaos of war and the crushing weight of coming home to an empty house. Sarah's funeral had been on a Tuesday. He'd missed it, trapped in a forward operating base while mortars fell like rain. By the time he made it home, the flowers on her grave were already wilted, and 12-year-old Liam had stopped talking for 6 weeks. Dad always fixes everything. He'd heard his son tell Maya Lopez one afternoon, watching through the kitchen window as the 2 kids sat on the porch steps. Cars, bikes, even Mrs. Henderson's lawnmower. But I don't think he knows how to fix himself. Jack had retreated to his workshop that night, the sting of truth following him like smoke. Now, at 2:47 p.m., he wiped grease from his hands and checked the clock on the wall. Liam would be getting out of school soon, probably already packing his backpack with those superhero drawings he was always sketching. The kid had talent, real artistic vision, but Jack noticed something troubling in the latest batch. The heroes all looked the same. Tall, dark-haired, wearing olive drab instead of bright costumes. They all looked like soldiers. They all looked like him. Jack grabbed his keys from the workbench, nodding goodbye to Jimmy. The drive to Millbrook Elementary took 7 minutes through tree-lined streets where American flags hung from nearly every porch. It was the kind of town where everyone knew your business, where the local papers still printed photos of bake sales and Little League games, where whispers followed Jack wherever he went. "That's the Mercer boy," they'd say. "Came back different from the war. Lost his wife while he was gone. Shame about that kid of his." He pulled into the school pickup lane, engine idling as children streamed through the double doors. Principal Clara Moreno stood at the entrance, her silver hair gleaming in the afternoon light. She waved at each child by name, her smile genuine and warm. Clara had taught here for 25 years, had even been Jack's 4th-grade teacher before he enlisted. She'd lost her own brother in Vietnam, though she rarely spoke of it. Some wounds, Jack had learned, were too deep for casual conversation. Liam appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, that familiar lopsided grin spreading across his face when he spotted the truck. At 12, he was all elbows and knees, growing too fast for Jack to keep up with new clothes. But his eyes, Sarah's eyes, bright blue and full of mischief, still held that spark that made Jack's chest tighten with fierce protectiveness. "Hey, Dad!" Liam jogged over, tossing his backpack through the open window before climbing in. "Guess what happened in art class today?" "Let me guess. You drew another superhero?" Liam's grin widened. "Maybe, but this one's different. He's got a kid's sidekick." Jack pulled away from the curb, stealing a glance at his son. "That's so?" "Yeah. See, the superhero used to be in this big war, right? And he came home all sad and broken. But then he realized he wasn't supposed to be fighting monsters anymore. He was supposed to be protecting his kid, so they became a team." Something twisted in Jack's chest, equal parts pride and pain. "Sounds like a good story." "It is. I'm gonna call it The Protector." Liam pulled out his sketch pad, flipping to a page covered in pencil marks. The drawing showed a tall figure in military fatigues, standing beside a smaller figure, both of them facing some unseen danger. At the bottom in Liam's careful handwriting, "Heroes aren't the ones who never fall down. They're the ones who get back up." Jack's throat tightened. "Where'd you hear that?" "Mrs. Moreno said it during morning announcements. She was talking about this janitor guy, Mr. Foster. Did you know he used to save kids from stuff? Like actual dangerous stuff? Samuel Foster. Jack remembered the name vaguely. An older man who'd worked at the school for decades, always quiet, always in the background. He died last month, heart attack, while mopping the gymnasium floors. She said he left behind this journal full of wise stuff. Maybe you should read it sometime, Dad. You like reading. Jack didn't respond, his attention caught by something in his rearview mirror. A thin column of smoke was rising in the distance, barely visible against the cloudy sky. Probably just someone burning leaves, though it seemed early in the season for that. They drove home in comfortable silence, Liam humming some tune from the radio while Jack's mind wandered to dinner plans and homework schedules. The smoke in the distance grew thicker, but Jack didn't notice. He was thinking about his son's drawing, about superheroes who got back up, about the weight of protection and the cost of falling down. He had no idea that in less than 24 hours, those simple truths would be tested by fire. The next afternoon arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Jack's war injuries ache in his left shoulder. He'd spent the morning replacing the transmission in a Ford Explorer, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of mechanical work. There was something soothing about problems that could be fixed with the right tools and enough patience. At 2:30, he cleaned his hands with industrial soap and headed out to pick up Liam. The routine was sacred. 7 minutes through downtown Millbrook, past the Veterans Memorial where his own name would be etched if this were a different kind of town, one that honored the living along with the dead. But today, something was wrong. Jack first noticed it as he turned onto Elm Street, a haze hanging in the air, too thick for autumn mist, too dark for morning fog. His nose caught the scent. Acrid, chemical, the kind of smoke that meant something was burning that shouldn't be. His pulse quickened as he pulled into the school pickup lane. Other parents were already gathering on the sidewalk, phones pressed to their ears. Children clutching backpacks with wide eyes. Principal Marino stood near the flagpole, her usually calm demeanor replaced by sharp, controlled urgency. Then Jack saw it. Thick black smoke was billowing from the back of the school building, rising from the direction of the gymnasium in churning columns that darkened the afternoon sky. Orange flames licked at the windows, and even from the parking lot, Jack could hear the distant wail of fire alarms mixed with something that made his blood freeze. Children's voices, high and frightened, calling for help. "Oh my God," a woman beside him whispered into her phone. "The gym's on fire, there are kids still inside." Jack was out of his truck before he realized he'd moved. His body had switched into a mode he recognized from Afghanistan. Time slowing, sound sharpening, everything except the mission fading into background static. He scanned the crowd for Liam and spotted him near the bike racks with Maya Lopez, both kids pressed against the chain-link fence, watching the smoke with the kind of fascination that comes before fear sets in. "Liam!" Jack's voice cut through the chaos. His son turned, and Jack saw his own eyes reflected there, blue, alert, unafraid, but beginning to understand. "Stay right there. Do not move from that spot. You hear me?" "Dad, what's—" "Stay there!" Jack was already running toward the building. Principal Moreno intercepted him halfway across the parking lot. "Jack, no! The fire department's on the way. It's too dangerous." "How many kids are inside?" "We don't know," her voice cracked with the admission. "We think everyone got out, but the smoke alarms went off during 6th grade PE. Some of the students might have been in the equipment room, or the locker rooms, or—" A window exploded outward from the gymnasium, showering glass onto the walkway below. Several parents screamed. Clara Moreno grabbed Jack's arm. "Please, you have a son. Don't." But Jack was already pulling away, his mind cataloging details with military precision. The main gym entrance would be blocked by smoke and flames. But there was a side door near the equipment room, and if he could get through the hallway leading to the cafeteria, he might be able to circle around. "Keep everyone back," he told Clara, his voice steady in a way that surprised them both. "And when the fire trucks get here, tell them there's a side entrance on the east wall." He didn't wait for her response. The side door was unlocked, thank God, but the hallway beyond was already thick with smoke. Jack pulled his t-shirt up over his nose and mouth, crouching low where the air was cleaner. The fire hadn't reached this section yet, but he could feel the heat growing with each step toward the gymnasium. His hands were steady. His breathing was controlled. For the first time in 2 years, the ghosts of Afghanistan weren't haunting him. They were helping him. Every lesson learned under enemy fire, every split-second decision that had meant the difference between life and death, all of it was focusing his mind like a laser. The gymnasium doors were closed, but not locked. Jack pressed his palm against the metal, testing the temperature. Hot, but not yet burning. He took a deep breath and pushed through. The scene inside was hellish. Flames had consumed the far wall where the storage closets were located, and the wooden bleachers were beginning to catch. Smoke churned near the ceiling like a living thing, descending slowly but steadily toward the floor. The sprinkler system had activated, but it was fighting a losing battle against the intensity of the blaze. That's when Jack heard it, a voice, faint but unmistakably young, coming from somewhere near the equipment room. "Help! Somebody help me!" Jack moved toward the sound, staying low, using the wall for guidance as the smoke thickened. His eyes streamed tears from the chemical burn, but he pressed forward. The voice called out again, weaker this time, and Jack's heart clenched with recognition. Caleb Foster. Samuel Foster's grandson, a quiet kid in Liam's grade who'd lost his father in a car accident just last month. What was he doing in here? Why hadn't he evacuated with the others? Jack found him huddled in the corner of the equipment room, pressed against a stack of gymnastics mats, coughing violently. The boy's face was streaked with soot and tears, his eyes wide with terror. "Caleb!" Jack dropped to his knees beside the boy. "What are you doing in here?" "I was hiding," Caleb choked out between coughs. "Tyler Morrison was picking on me again, and I just wanted to be alone." Then the alarms started going off, and there was so much smoke, I couldn't find the door. Behind them, something crashed, probably part of the ceiling giving way. The heat was becoming unbearable, and Jack could see that their window of escape was rapidly closing. "Okay, buddy, I'm gonna get you out of here." Jack scooped Caleb into his arms, feeling the boy's thin frame trembling against his chest. "Hold on tight and keep your face buried in my shirt, all right?" As he stood, something caught his eye. There, wedged between a fallen beam and an overturned storage bin, was a leather-bound book. The cover was singed but intact, and even through the smoke and chaos, Jack could make out the careful handwriting on the first page. Property of Samuel Foster. Without thinking, Jack grabbed the journal and tucked it inside his jacket. Then he ran for the exit, Caleb clinging to his neck, as the gymnasium collapsed behind them in a roar of flame and falling timber. The journey back through the smoke-filled hallway became a descent into Jack's own private hell. Each step toward safety triggered memories he'd spent 2 years trying to bury. The weight of a wounded soldier in his arms, the acrid smell of burning diesel fuel, the sound of his own voice shouting coordinates into a radio while mortars fell like deadly rain. But this time was different. This time, the person he was carrying was alive, breathing, depending on him to make it out. Hey, it's okay." Jack held his son tight, breathing in the familiar scent of his hair, feeling the solid reality of his living, breathing child. "I'm okay. We're both okay." But even as he said it, Jack could feel the journal pressed against his chest, a reminder that this moment of heroism was connected to something larger, something he didn't yet understand. Samuel Foster's words, written in careful script, waiting to be discovered. Fire Chief Holt was talking to the news crew that had materialized seemingly from nowhere. "Local veteran saves student from school fire." Jack heard someone say, "Hero returns from the flames." Hero. The word sat uncomfortably in Jack's mind. Heroes were supposed to save everyone. Heroes didn't come home from war while better men stayed behind in flag-draped coffins. Heroes didn't fail to protect the people they loved most. But as Liam pulled back to look at him, Jack saw something in his son's eyes he hadn't seen in 2 years. Pride. Pure, uncomplicated pride in his father. "You really are a superhero," Liam whispered, and for the first time since coming home from Afghanistan, Jack thought maybe, just maybe, his son might be right. The crowd that had gathered in the school parking lot fell silent as Jack emerged from the smoke carrying Caleb Foster. For a moment that stretched like eternity, the only sounds were the crackling of flames behind them and the distant wail of approaching sirens. Then someone started clapping, a slow, deliberate rhythm that spread through the assembly like wildfire. Jack barely heard it. His world had narrowed to the essential. Caleb's steady breathing, Liam's solid warmth pressed against his side, and the strange weight of Samuel Foster's journal tucked inside his jacket. Everything else felt distant, muffled, as if he were watching someone else's life unfold through thick glass. Fire Chief Raymond Holt materialized beside them as the paramedics loaded Caleb onto a stretcher. The chief was a mountain of a man, weathered by 30 years of running toward danger while others ran away. His eyes held the kind of respect usually reserved for fellow firefighters. "Son," Holt said, placing a heavy hand on Jack's shoulder, "that was either the bravest thing I've seen in 3 decades or the most foolish. Maybe both." Jack managed a weak smile. "Probably both. Either way, that boy's alive because of you." Holt's voice carried the weight of authority, the kind that made people listen. "Don't let anyone tell you different." As the paramedics wheeled Caleb toward the ambulance, the boy's eyes fluttered open. Through the oxygen mask, he mouthed 2 words that hit Jack like a physical blow. "Thank you." Jack nodded, his throat too tight for words. Behind the EMTs, a woman emerged from the crowd, Caleb's mother, Sarah Foster. Her face was streaked with tears, her hands shaking as she reached for her son's hand. "Mrs. Foster," Principal Moreno intercepted her gently. "He's going to be fine. Mr. Mercer got to him in time." Sarah Foster turned toward Jack, and he saw something in her eyes that made him want to disappear. Gratitude, yes, but also recognition, the look of someone who understood the weight of loss and the fragile nature of second chances. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't need to," Jack replied. "Anyone would have." "No." She shook her head firmly. "Not anyone. My father-in-law always said there were 2 kinds of people in the world. Those who run toward trouble and those who run away. You ran toward it." The crowd was growing larger, drawn by the smoke and sirens. Jack recognized faces from around town, neighbors, shop owners, parents he'd seen at school functions but never really talked to. For 2 years, he'd been the quiet veteran who kept to himself, the damaged soldier who couldn't quite fit back into civilian life. Now they were looking at him differently. "Jack Mercer," a woman with a microphone and a camera crew in tow pushed through the crowd. "I'm Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. Can you tell us what went through your mind when you decided to run into that burning building?" The camera lens focused on his face like a black eye, unblinking and invasive. Jack instinctively stepped back, pulling Liam closer. "I wasn't thinking," he said simply. "I just heard a kid calling for help." "But you're a decorated veteran, aren't you? You served multiple tours in Afghanistan. Did your military training help you in there?" The questions kept coming, rapid fire and hungry for details. Jack felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the way his breathing wanted to shallow out when too many people were looking at him, expecting him to be something he wasn't sure he could be. "Dad," Liam's voice cut through the noise, "can we go home now?" Jack looked down at his son and saw concern in those blue eyes, not fear for himself, but worry for his father. The kid had learned to read Jack's moods, to recognize when the walls were closing in. "Yeah, buddy, we can go home." Principal Moreno stepped forward, her teacher's instincts recognizing the moment. "That's enough questions for now," she announced with quiet authority. "Mr. Mercer needs to get checked out by the paramedics, and his son needs to get home." As they walked toward Jack's truck, the crowd parted like water. Some people nodded respectfully, others whispered among themselves. Jack caught fragments of conversation that made his skin crawl with unfamiliar attention. Always knew there was something special about him. Quiet ones are always the bravest. His boy must be so proud. But it was the last comment that stopped him cold, spoken by an elderly man Jack recognized from the hardware store. That's what real heroes look like. Not like those phonies on TV. Hero. There was that word again, following him like smoke. Jack's hand unconsciously moved to his jacket, feeling the outline of Samuel Foster's journal. Maybe the old janitor had struggled with the same burden, the weight of other people's expectations, the uncomfortable pedestal that came with doing what felt like simple human decency. Liam climbed into the passenger seat and immediately pulled out his sketch pad. "Dad, can I draw what happened today?" "If you want to." I'm gonna make it a comic book. The Protector saves the day. Want to see? Jack watched as his son's pencil moved across the paper with surprising skill. The drawing that emerged showed a tall figure carrying a smaller one through what was clearly meant to be smoke and flames. But what caught Jack's attention was the expression Liam had given the hero. Not triumphant or proud, but determined and gentle. The face of someone who understood that true strength came from caring more about others than yourself. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That's really good, Liam. Thanks. Hey, Dad? Yeah? I know you don't like it when people call you a hero and stuff, but I just want you to know, I always thought you were one, even before today. Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, he could see the smoke still rising from the school, black against the October sky. But for the first time in 2 years, when he looked at his reflection, he didn't immediately see the soldier who'd failed to save his squad mates. He saw a father, a protector. Maybe, just maybe, something close to the man his son believed him to be. The journal pressed against his ribs like a secret, waiting to be discovered. Samuel Foster's words, whatever they were, felt suddenly urgent. A man who'd spent his life quietly serving others, who'd understood something about sacrifice and second chances that Jack was only beginning to glimpse. That night, after Liam was asleep, Jack planned to read those words. To see if a dead janitor's wisdom could help a living father figure out how to carry the unexpected weight of being called a hero. The house felt too quiet after the chaos of the afternoon. Jack sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold between his hands while Liam finished his homework upstairs. The journal lay before him like an unexploded device, innocuous leather binding hiding whatever truth Samuel Foster had committed to paper. Jack's fingers traced the singed edges where flames had licked at the cover. The old man had died clutching this book, according to the paramedics who'd found him collapsed in the gymnasium. A heart attack, they'd said, probably brought on by the stress of trying to evacuate the building when the fire started. Samuel Foster, the invisible man who'd mopped floors and fixed broken equipment for 30 years, who'd known every child's name and somehow understood which ones needed an extra smile, which ones came to school hungry, which ones carried bruises that had nothing to do with playground falls. Jack opened the journal to the first page. The handwriting was precise, careful, the script of a man who chose his words deliberately. June 15, 2003. They think I don't notice things, but janitors see everything. We're invisible to most folks, which means we catch the moments when people think no one's watching. Today I saw Tommy Henderson sharing his lunch with that new girl, Madison, because she forgot hers again. Nobody asked him to. Nobody praised him for it. He just did what needed doing. Real heroes, I'm learning, aren't the ones who get medals. They're the ones who show up every day, who do the right thing when no one's looking, who carry other people's burdens without being asked. Jack's throat tightened. He thought of Liam upstairs, probably drawing another superhero comic, still believing his father was something special despite all evidence to the contrary. August 3, 2003. Lost Martha 5 years ago today. Some mornings I wake up and forget she's gone, reach across the bed expecting to find her there. The grief counselor says it gets easier, but I think she's wrong. It doesn't get easier. You just get stronger, like a muscle that's been torn and heals back tougher. I understand now why I took this job. It's not about the work, it's about the children. Every day I get to see hope walking around in small bodies, dreams taking shape in young minds. It reminds me that the world keeps spinning, keeps growing, keeps believing in tomorrow, even when today feels impossible. Jack set the journal down, his hands suddenly unsteady. Outside, autumn wind rattled the windows, carrying the scent of smoke from the school fire. He thought about Martha Foster, a woman he'd never met, and the way grief could hollow out a person's chest until it felt like breathing through broken glass. "Dad?" Liam's voice from the kitchen doorway made Jack look up. His son stood there in pajama pants and an oversized t-shirt, hair sticking up in directions that defied physics. "Hey buddy, thought you were asleep." "Couldn't sleep. Keep thinking about what happened today." Liam padded over and slipped into the chair across from Jack. "What's that book?" Jack hesitated, then turned the journal so Liam could see the cover. It belonged to Mr. Foster, Caleb's grandfather. "I found it in the gym when I was getting Caleb out." "The janitor guy? The one who died?" "Yeah." Liam reached out tentatively, as if the journal might bite him. "What's it say?" Jack flipped through a few pages, looking for something appropriate to share with a 12-year-old. He found it 3 entries later. September 12, 2003. Watched Jack Mercer's boy, little Liam, help that kid with the broken wheelchair today. The wheel fell off right in the middle of the hallway, and instead of walking around like most kids would, Liam got down on his hands and knees and fixed it. Got his school clothes dirty, made himself late for class, didn't care, just saw someone who needed help and helped. His father would be proud if he could see it. That boy's got the heart of a protector, just like his old man. Different wars, same courage. Liam's eyes widened. He wrote about me. Apparently he noticed more than people thought. Jack felt something shift in his chest, a loosening he hadn't experienced in months. Listen to this one. October 7, 2003. Some folks think being a hero means doing something big and dramatic, getting your picture in the paper, having people call you brave. But I've been watching heroes for 30 years, and most of them are a lot quieter than that. Heroes are single mothers working 3 jobs to keep their kids fed. Heroes are teachers staying late to help struggling students. Heroes are soldiers coming home broken and still getting up every morning to take care of their children, even when their own hearts are held together with tape and stubborn love. The real heroes don't wear capes. They wear work clothes and worry lines, and the kind of tired that goes bone deep. They show up anyway. Jack's voice caught on the last sentence. Liam reached across the table and touched his father's hand. "Dad, you okay?" Yeah, I'm okay." Jack wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Mr. Foster was a pretty smart guy. Can I read some more?" They spent the next hour taking turns reading entries aloud. Samuel Foster had documented 30 years of small kindnesses, quiet heroisms, moments of grace that happened when no one was watching. He'd written about children who'd grown up to become teachers and nurses and mechanics, about the way love could echo through generations, about the difference between being powerful and being strong. March 15, 2004. Strength isn't about how much weight you can lift or how fast you can run. It's about carrying burdens that aren't yours because someone needs you to. It's about getting back up when life knocks you down, not because you're unbreakable, but because breaking and healing are part of the same process. I see that strength every day in these hallways, in the kids who include the lonely ones, in the teachers who see potential where others see problems, in the parents who love their children enough to let them make mistakes and learn from them. And sometimes I see it in the mirror. An old man who lost everything that mattered and chose to keep serving anyway. Maybe that's enough. Maybe showing up is enough. Liam yawned, his head drooping toward the table. "Dad, do you think Mr. Foster knew he was going to die?" "I don't know, buddy." "Why?" "Because the last thing he wrote, it sounds like he was saying goodbye." Jack flipped to the final entry, dated just a week before Samuel Foster's death. October 14, 2003. If someone finds this journal, I hope they understand what I've tried to say. Life is short and precious and full of unexpected chances to matter. Don't waste them. Don't wait for permission to be kind. Don't let fear keep you from loving deeply, even when love means risking everything. To whoever reads this, you are braver than you think, stronger than you feel, and more important than you know. The world needs your particular light. Don't hide it under a bushel. Show up. That's all any of us can do. Show up and trust that it's enough. Liam was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I think he would have liked what you did today, Dad, running into the fire to save Caleb." Jack nodded, not trusting his voice. Outside, the wind had died down, leaving the house wrapped in the kind of silence that felt sacred. He thought about Samuel Foster writing these words alone at this same table, trying to make sense of loss and love and the weight of carrying on. "Come on," Jack said finally. "Let's get you back to bed." As they climbed the stairs together, Liam said sleepily, "Dad, I'm glad you brought Mr. Foster's journal home. I think he wanted someone to find it, someone who would understand." Jack tucked his son into bed, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "I think you're right." Back in the kitchen, Jack opened the journal to a blank page near the back. He picked up a pen and began to write. October 15th, 2003. My name is Jack Mercer. Today I found this journal after pulling a boy named Caleb Foster from a burning school. I think his grandfather would want to know that Caleb is safe, that his courage lives on in a new generation. I'm not sure I deserve to be called a hero, but Samuel Foster's words are helping me understand that maybe deserving isn't the point. Maybe showing up is enough. Maybe love is enough. Maybe we're all stronger than we think. 3 days after the fire, Jack found himself standing in Principal Clara Moreno's office, holding Samuel Foster's journal like a sacred text. The morning sun streamed through her windows, casting warm light across walls lined with children's artwork and framed photos of decades of graduating classes. Clara looked up from her desk, her silver hair catching the light, her face marked by the kind of lines that came from 30 years of caring deeply about other people's children. When she saw the journal in Jack's hands, her expression softened with recognition. "Is that Samuel's?" she asked quietly. Jack nodded, settling into the chair across from her desk. The office smelled like coffee and old books, the kind of place where important conversations happened. "I found it in the gym when I got Caleb out. I've been reading it." "I can't see anything," Caleb whispered against Jack's chest, his small hands gripping the fabric of Jack's work shirt. "That's okay, buddy, I've got you." Jack's voice was steadier than he felt. The smoke was thicker now, reaching down toward the floor like grasping fingers. He kept one hand on the wall, using it to navigate while his other arm supported Caleb's weight. A beam creaked overhead, wood stressed beyond its limits by the heat. Jack instinctively ducked, the movement so automatic, it surprised him. In Afghanistan, you learned to read the language of destruction, which sounds meant immediate danger, which meant you had a few more seconds, which meant it was already too late. This one meant they needed to move faster. "Jack?" Caleb's voice was smaller now, weaker. "Yeah?" "My grandpa used to tell me stories about heroes. He said real heroes don't wear capes or have superpowers. They just show up when people need them." Something twisted in Jack's chest. Samuel Foster had been talking about people like that, people who ran toward danger instead of away from it. Jack had been one of those people once, before the war changed him, before he came home broken and haunted. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of them. Jack's lungs burned with each breath, and sweat poured down his face despite the soaked t-shirt he'd pulled up as a makeshift filter. Behind them, he could hear the fire gaining ground, windows exploding, ceiling tiles crashing to the floor, the hungry roar of flames consuming everything in their path. "Talk to me, Caleb. Stay awake, okay?" "My dad died in a car accident," the boy said, his words coming in short bursts between labored breaths. "Grandpa said Dad was a hero too, because he was coming to pick me up from soccer practice. He was always picking me up, always showing up." Jack's throat tightened. He thought of Liam waiting by the fence, probably terrified, watching smoke pour from the building where his father had disappeared. The parallel wasn't lost on him. Another father, another child, another moment where everything could go wrong in an instant. "Your grandpa sounds like a smart man." He was. He always knew stuff, like deep stuff. He wrote it all down in this journal he kept. "Mom said he was going to give it to me when I turned 13, but then he died too." The journal. Jack could feel its weight against his ribs, pressed between his jacket and his chest. He'd grabbed it without thinking, some instinct telling him it was important. Now, hearing Caleb talk about it, he was glad he had. They reached the side door, and Jack pushed through into the blessed relief of clean air. The afternoon sun seemed impossibly bright after the darkness of the smoke-filled hallway. Jack stumbled onto the grass, his legs suddenly unsteady, and fell to his knees while still clutching Caleb. The boy was unconscious now, overcome by smoke inhalation, but his chest was rising and falling steadily. Jack laid him gently on the ground and tilted his head back to open his airway. Another skill learned in combat, another ghost from the war that was actually helping instead of haunting. "Jack! Oh my God, Jack!" Principal Moreno's voice cut through the ringing in his ears. She was running toward them, followed by what looked like half the town. Fire trucks were pulling into the parking lot, their sirens wailing, and paramedics were already unloading equipment. Jack looked up as the EMTs took over Caleb's care, fitting him with an oxygen mask and checking his vital signs. The boy's color was better already, pink returning to his cheeks as clean oxygen filled his lungs. "He's going to be okay," one of the paramedics said, catching Jack's worried expression. Smoke inhalation, probably some minor burns on his hands, but he'll be fine. You got to him in time. Fire Chief Raymond Holt approached, his weathered face grim but respectful. Hell of a thing you did in there, son. Hell of a thing. Jack nodded, not trusting himself to speak. His hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally ebbing, leaving him aware of his own burns and the way his lungs still burned with each breath. That's when he saw Liam. His son was standing at the edge of the crowd, eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. When their gazes met, Liam broke away from Maya and ran toward him, launching himself into Jack's arms with enough force to nearly knock them both over. Dad, when I saw the smoke, I thought you were gonna... I wondered what happened to that journal. Clara's voice carried a note of reverence. Samuel was always writing in it. During lunch breaks, after school, sometimes I'd see him sitting by the flagpole in the morning, just writing. I never asked what he was documenting. Stories. Observations. Wisdom. Jack opened to a page he'd marked with a torn piece of paper. He wrote about you once, said you were the kind of principal who remembered that children were people first, students second. Clara's eyes misted slightly. He was too kind. I don't think so. Jack flipped through several pages, their edges still faintly singed. He saw things, Clara, really saw them. The way teachers stayed late for struggling kids, the way parents sacrificed for their children, the way... He paused, finding the entry he wanted. The way you never gave up on the broken ones. He read aloud. Principal Moreno has a gift. She can see past the surface, past the angry outbursts, the failing grades, the defensive walls children build when the world has hurt them too many times. She sees the person underneath. Last week, she spent her lunch hour teaching Marcus Coleman to tie his shoes because no one at home had time to show him. She didn't make it a big production, didn't call attention to it, just saw a need and filled it. Clara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Marcus is in high school now, honor roll student, planning to study engineering. Samuel would be proud. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of shared loss settling between them. Finally, Clara spoke. Jack, there's something you should know about Samuel, something most people never learned. She stood and moved to a filing cabinet, withdrawing a manila folder marked Foster Samuel Personnel. From it, she pulled a yellowed newspaper clipping, the paper brittle with age. This is from 1987, she said, handing it to Jack. Long before you moved back to town. The headline read, School Janitor Saves 3 Children in Boiler Room Fire. Below it was a grainy, black and white photo of a younger Samuel Foster, his face streaked with soot, standing beside 3 elementary school children who were wrapped in emergency blankets. Jack read the article quickly, his respect for the old janitor deepening with each paragraph. The boiler had exploded during a winter storm, trapping the children in the basement. Samuel had crawled through smoke and debris to reach them, carrying them out one by one while the building's foundation cracked around them. He never talked about it, Clara said. If you asked him directly, he'd just say he did what anyone would do. But Jack, she met his eyes. I see the same thing in you, that willingness to run toward danger instead of away from it. Jack set the clipping down carefully. I'm not a hero, Clara. Heroes don't come home from war while better men stay behind in body bags. Heroes don't fail to protect the people they love most. Your wife? The question hung in the air like smoke. Jack had never talked about Sarah's death with anyone in Millbrook, had kept that particular wound sealed tight. But something about Clara's presence, about Samuel's words still echoing in his mind, made him want to try. She died while I was deployed, he said finally. Cancer. I should have been there. Should have come home when she got sick. Should have put her before my duty to my squad. Instead, I stayed and fought a war that didn't matter while the most important person in my life died alone. Clara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. Jack, can I tell you about my brother Miguel? Jack nodded. He was killed in Vietnam when I was 23, a medic, killed trying to save his wounded sergeant under enemy fire. Clara's voice took on the careful cadence of someone who'd told this story before, but still felt its weight. For years I was angry. Angry at the war, angry at the army, angry at Miguel for being brave enough to die for someone else. I thought heroes were selfish, choosing glory over the people who loved them. Ah, Chris. She pulled another photo from the folder. A young man in military uniform, his smile bright and familiar. But Miguel wrote letters, dozens of them, and in every single one he talked about coming home, about the life he wanted to build, the family he hoped to have. He wasn't choosing war over love, Jack. He was choosing to serve so that the people he loved could live in a safer world. Jack stared at the photo, seeing echoes of his own choices reflected in a stranger's face. Your wife knew who you were when she married you, Clara continued. She knew you were the kind of man who would put duty before personal comfort, who would stay with your squad because they depended on you. That wasn't a betrayal of your love, it was an expression of it. But she died alone. She died knowing you were exactly the man she fell in love with, the kind of man who keeps his promises, who doesn't abandon people who need him. Clara's voice softened. The kind of man who runs into burning buildings to save children. Jack felt something crack open in his chest, a wall he'd built around his grief beginning to crumble. I don't know how to forgive myself. Maybe forgiveness isn't yours to give, Clara said gently. Maybe the only person who could forgive you already did, a long time ago. They sat together as the morning sun climbed higher, sharing the kind of silence that came after important truths had been spoken. Finally, Jack opened Samuel's journal to a passage he'd read dozens of times. Guilt is a luxury we can't afford when there are still people who need us. The dead don't want our self-punishment. They want us to live fully, love deeply, and protect fiercely. Honor their memory by being the person they believed you could be. I think Samuel understood something about carrying burdens, Jack said. I think he understood that the heaviest burdens are often the ones we place on ourselves. Clara smiled, the first genuinely happy expression Jack had seen from her since the fire. And I think he would be proud to know his words are helping you heal. Jack closed the journal and stood to leave. At the door, he turned back. Clara, Caleb's mother wants to thank me in person. She invited me and Liam over for dinner tomorrow night. That sounds like a good thing. I'm scared, Jack admitted. Scared of seeing that gratitude in her eyes, scared of disappointing her, scared of… He trailed off. Scared of being human? Jack managed a weak smile. Something like that. Jack, can I give you some advice? Go, show up, let yourself be thanked, let yourself be seen as something other than damaged goods. Clara's voice carried the authority of 3 decades spent shepherding children through life's difficulties. Samuel spent his whole life believing that showing up was enough. Don't prove him wrong. As Jack walked toward his truck, he felt the journal's weight against his chest like a promise. Tonight he would read more of Samuel's words. Tomorrow he would face Caleb and his mother and try to accept their gratitude without flinching. And slowly, page by page, word by word, he would learn to forgive himself for surviving when others didn't. For being human in a world that demanded heroes. The Foster house sat on Maple Street, like a monument to middle-class dreams deferred. Paint peeled from the shutters, and the front porch sagged slightly under the weight of too many harsh winters. But the windows glowed with warm light, and Jacko. Lanterns lined the walkway, a mother's attempt to maintain normalcy for her grieving son. Jack sat in his truck for a full minute before getting out, Liam beside him clutching a drawing he'd made for Caleb. The journal rested in Jack's jacket pocket, its weight both comforting and challenging. Samuel Foster's words had been echoing in his mind all day. The real heroes don't wear capes. They wear work clothes and worry lines and the kind of tired that goes bone deep. Dad, you okay? Liam's voice cut through Jack's hesitation. Yeah, buddy, just thinking. About Mr. Foster's journal? Jack nodded. Over the past few days, he and Liam had developed a ritual of reading Samuel's entries together before bedtime. The old janitor's wisdom was slowly reshaping how Jack saw himself, his choices, his failures and triumphs. Come on, Jack said finally. Let's go see how Caleb's doing. Sarah Foster answered the door before they could knock, as if she'd been watching for them through the window. She was younger than Jack had expected, maybe 35. With the kind of exhausted beauty that came from carrying too much responsibility alone. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore a simple blue dress that brought out eyes the same shade as her son's. "Mr. Mercer," she said, her voice catching slightly, "thank you so much for coming." "Jack, please, and this is my son, Liam." Liam stepped forward with the shy politeness Jack had drilled into him. "I brought Caleb a drawing," he said, holding up the folded paper. Sarah's smile was genuine, transforming her tired features. "He's been asking about you both all day. Caleb, your guests are here." The sound of feet thundering downstairs announced Caleb's arrival. He appeared in the doorway wearing Spider-Man pajamas, his face still bearing faint marks from the smoke exposure but his eyes bright with excitement. "Jack," he said, then caught himself. "I mean Mr. Mercer, Mom says you saved my life." Jack crouched down to Caleb's level, feeling that familiar tightness in his chest that came when children looked at him with unguarded trust. "You did pretty good saving yourself, buddy. You were smart to stay low where the air was cleaner. Grandpa taught me that. He said smoke rises, so if there's ever a fire, get down on the ground and crawl." Caleb's voice dropped to a whisper. "I miss him a lot." "I bet you do." Jack reached into his jacket and pulled out Samuel's journal. "Actually, I found something that belonged to your grandpa. I thought you might want to see it." Caleb's eyes widened as he recognized the leather binding. "That's his special book. He was always writing in it. Mom said it got lost in the fire." "Not lost," Jack said gently, just waiting for the right person to find it. Sarah invited them into the living room, where the scent of pot roast filled the air and family photos lined the mantelpiece. Jack noticed several pictures of a man in his 70s, Samuel Foster, surrounded by children and grandchildren, his face kind and patient. During dinner, Caleb peppered Jack with questions about the rescue, about being a soldier, about what it felt like to be brave. Jack answered as honestly as he could, trying to separate the myth from the reality. "Were you scared?" Caleb asked around a mouthful of mashed potatoes. "Terrified," Jack admitted. "Fear doesn't make you not brave, Caleb. Brave is being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway." "Grandpa used to say something like that," Caleb said. "He said courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about loving someone more than you're afraid." Jack felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the tight bands that had constricted his breathing for 2 years. "Your grandpa was a wise man." After dinner, while Sarah cleared the dishes despite Jack's offers to help, Caleb led Liam to his room to show off his collection of action figures. Jack found himself alone with the family photos, studying Samuel Foster's face and trying to reconcile the quiet janitor with the hero who had saved 3 children in 1987. "He would have liked you," Sarah said, appearing beside him with 2 cups of coffee. "I wish I'd known him better. He noticed you, though. After you moved back to town with Liam." Sarah handed Jack a mug, her fingers briefly touching his. "He mentioned you in his prayers sometimes. Said you had the look of a man carrying too much weight alone." Jack's throat tightened. He was observant. He lost his son, Caleb's father, when Caleb was just 8. Car accident on a rainy night, coming home from Caleb's soccer practice. Sarah's voice was steady, but Jack could hear the carefully controlled emotion underneath. For months afterward, Samuel blamed himself. Said if he'd offered to pick up Caleb that night, David would still be alive. How did he get past it? He didn't, not entirely, but he learned to carry the grief differently. He said guilt was just love with nowhere to go, and the trick was finding new places to put that love. Sarah looked at Jack directly. That's what the journal was for, a place to put all the love and wisdom he couldn't give to David anymore. From upstairs came the sound of children's laughter, Caleb and Liam bonding over shared interests and the simple joy of friendship. Jack thought about his own son, about the conversations they'd had over Samuel's journal, about the way Liam's eyes lit up when he read the old janitor's words about everyday heroes. "Sarah," Jack said carefully, "Caleb mentioned that Samuel was going to give him the journal when he turned 13. That was the plan. Samuel said 13 was when boys started becoming men, when they needed to understand what real strength looked like." Jack pulled the journal from his pocket. "Then maybe it's time." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Jack, you found it. It's yours now." "No," Jack said firmly. "It belongs to Caleb. But I was hoping maybe I could read it with him sometimes. The way Liam and I have been doing, if that's okay with you." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. When they called the boys downstairs, Jack knelt beside Caleb and placed the journal in his small hands. "This was your grandpa's," Jack said. "He wrote down everything he learned about being brave, about being kind, about being the kind of man who makes the world a little better just by being in it." Caleb clutched the journal to his chest, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Will you help me read it? Some of the words are pretty big." "I'd be honored." As they prepared to leave, Caleb suddenly wrapped his arms around Jack's waist in a fierce hug. "Thank you for saving me," he whispered. "And thank you for bringing Grandpa's words back." Jack hugged him back, feeling tears he'd held back for 2 years finally beginning to fall. In this child's embrace, he found something he'd thought was lost forever. The belief that he might actually be worthy of the love he'd been given, that his presence in the world might matter to someone besides his son. Walking to the truck under a canopy of October stars, Liam slipped his hand into Jack's. "Dad, I think Mr. Foster was right about you." "What do you mean?" In his journal, he wrote that real heroes are the ones who show up every day even when their hearts are broken. "That's you, Dad. You show up for me every single day." Jack squeezed his son's hand, feeling the weight of Samuel Foster's wisdom settling into his bones like a blessing. Maybe healing didn't come all at once. Maybe it came in moments like this: a child's gratitude, a mother's understanding, a son's unwavering love. Maybe showing up really was enough. The assembly was supposed to be a celebration. 3 weeks after the fire, Millbrook Elementary had organized a special ceremony to honor Jack's heroism. The new temporary gymnasium was packed with students, parents, and local dignitaries, all gathered to hear Fire Chief Holt present Jack with a civilian commendation for bravery. Jack sat in the front row, his dress shirt feeling like a straitjacket, watching Principal Moreno address the crowd. Liam sat beside him, practically vibrating with pride, while Caleb and his mother occupied seats 2 rows back. The boy had barely let the journal out of his sight since Jack had given it to him, carrying it to school each day like a talisman. "Heroes come in many forms," Clara was saying, her voice carrying easily through the temporary sound system. "But the truest heroes are often the quietest ones, the people who act not for glory or recognition, but simply because someone needs help." The audience murmured approval. Jack felt sweat gathering at his collar despite the cool October air. Public speaking had never been his strong suit, even before the war. Now, with 100 pairs of eyes focused on him, his chest was beginning to tighten in a way that felt uncomfortably familiar. "Today we honor Jack Mercer," Clara continued, "a man who risked his life to save one of our students, and in doing so reminded us all what courage really looks like." Applause filled the gymnasium, but to Jack's ears it sounded like incoming artillery. His breathing began to shallow out, and he gripped the edges of his folding chair to keep his hands from shaking. "It's just applause," he told himself. "Just people clapping. You're safe. Liam is safe. Everyone is safe." But his body wasn't listening to logic. The temporary walls of the gymnasium suddenly felt too close, too confining. The exit seemed impossibly far away, blocked by rows of people who expected him to stand up, to speak, to be the hero they thought he was. Fire Chief Holt took the microphone, his weathered face serious as he began recounting the details of the rescue. "When we arrived on scene, the gymnasium was fully engulfed. Temperatures inside had reached over 800 degrees. Most people would have waited for professional firefighters to arrive. Jack Mercer ran toward the danger." The words blurred together as Jack's vision began to tunnel. The applause grew louder, and underneath it he could swear he heard the whine of incoming mortars, the sharp crack of rifle fire, the screams of wounded soldiers calling for medic. Not here, he thought desperately, not now, not in front of everyone. But his body had made the decision for him. His hands were trembling visibly now, his breathing coming in short, sharp gasps that felt like drowning in air. The gymnasium walls seemed to be pressing inward, and the faces in the crowd began to blur into the accusing stares of dead soldiers. "And now," Chief Holt was saying, "I'd like to ask Jack Mercer to come forward to receive this commendation." Jack tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. The folding chair scraped against the floor as he half fell back into it, and several people in the front row turned to look at him with concern. That's when Liam noticed what was happening. "Dad?" His son's voice cut through the roar in Jack's head like a lifeline. "Dad, look at me." Jack turned toward Liam's voice, fighting to focus on his son's face instead of the crowd, the walls, the memories that were threatening to drown him. "Remember what Mr. Foster wrote?" Liam said quietly, his 12-year-old voice steady and calm. "About being brave when you're scared? You're still brave, Dad, even when this happens." Liam reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper, one of Samuel Foster's journal entries that they'd copied and kept. In his clear young voice, he read, "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else is more important than fear." The words cut through Jack's panic like a blade through fog. He focused on his son's face, on the love and faith he saw there, and slowly his breathing began to even out. Principal Moreno had noticed the commotion and was making her way over, but Liam held up a hand to stop her. "He's okay," Liam said with quiet authority. "He just needs a minute." The murmur of conversation in the gymnasium was growing louder as people began to notice that something was wrong. Jack could hear fragments of whispered comments. "Is he all right? What's happening? Poor guy must be overwhelmed." And then, cutting through the whispers like a bell, came a voice Jack didn't expect. Caleb Foster, standing up in his seat and addressing the crowd with the fearless honesty of a 10-year-old. "My grandpa used to say that being strong doesn't mean you never fall down," Caleb announced, his young voice carrying clearly through the gymnasium. "It means you get back up when you do. Jack saved my life when he was scared, and he's still brave even when his brain gets scared now." A hush fell over the assembled crowd. Jack looked up to see dozens of faces turn toward him, not with pity or disappointment, but with something that looked remarkably like understanding. Principal Morena stepped forward, her teacher's instincts guiding her through the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, courage comes in many forms. Sometimes it's running into a burning building. Sometimes it's simply showing up when every part of you wants to hide. Today, Jack Mercer has shown us both kinds of courage." The applause that followed was different. Softer, more respectful, less like artillery and more like acceptance. Jack managed to stand, his legs still unsteady but functional, and walked to the front of the gymnasium. Chief Holt handed him the commendation with a nod of respect. "Take your time, son. Say whatever feels right." Jack looked out at the crowd, at the faces of his neighbors and fellow parents, at children who were learning what it meant to be human in an imperfect world. He thought about Samuel Foster's words, about showing up even when it was hard, about love being stronger than fear. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly through the gymnasium. "I'm not good at speeches and I'm not always good at being brave, but I've learned something important from a wise man who used to work in this school." He pulled out the journal entry Liam had read, his hands steadier now. Samuel Foster wrote that heroes aren't the people who never fall down, they're the people who get back up. Today I fell down in front of all of you, and you helped me get back up. That makes every one of you a hero in my book. Jack looked directly at Caleb, at his own son, at Principal Moreno. "Thank you for reminding me that being broken doesn't make you worthless. Sometimes being broken is what makes you useful." The applause this time was sustained but gentle, like rain on a roof. As Jack returned to his seat, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 2 years. The possibility that he might actually belong somewhere again. Liam grabbed his hand as he sat down. "I'm proud of you, Dad. Even though I had a panic attack in front of the whole town?" "Especially because of that," Liam said with the wisdom of a child who'd learned to see strength in vulnerability. "Mr. Foster would be proud too." Jack squeezed his son's hand and settled back to listen as Clara announced the final part of the ceremony, the dedication of a memorial garden in Samuel Foster's honor, where his journal entries would be displayed for future generations to read and learn from. As the crowd began to disperse, Jack felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Sarah Foster, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Samuel always said the bravest thing a person could do was let others see them as they really are," she said quietly. "Thank you for showing these children that even heroes are human." Jack nodded, not trusting his voice, but as he watched Caleb carefully tucking Samuel's journal into his backpack, he understood that healing wasn't a destination. It was a daily choice to keep showing up, keep trying, keep believing that broken things could still be useful. Even when, especially when, the whole world was watching. The memorial service for Samuel Foster was held on a gray November morning when the last autumn leaves clung stubbornly to bare branches. The entire town seemed to have turned out. filling the school auditorium beyond capacity. Jack sat in the front row with Liam, Caleb, and Sarah, feeling the weight of expectation pressing down on him like a physical force. Principal Moreno had asked him to speak about Samuel's journal, about the wisdom it contained and the impact it had made on his life. For 3 days, Jack had been writing and rewriting his remarks, trying to find words that would honor the old janitor's memory without revealing too much of his own struggles. But Samuel's words kept echoing in his mind. The real heroes don't wear capes. They wear work clothes and worry lines and the kind of tired that goes bone deep. They show up anyway. Show up. That's what this was about. Not being perfect, not having all the answers, but simply being present when people needed you. The service began with remembrances from former students, teachers who had worked alongside Samuel, parents whose children had been touched by his quiet kindness. Each speaker painted a picture of a man who had served others without fanfare, who had found meaning in small acts of service and daily choices to care. Clara Moreno spoke about Samuel's 30 years of dedication, his gentle way with children, his ability to see potential where others saw problems. Fire Chief Holt talked about the 1987 rescue, how Samuel had never wanted recognition for saving those 3 children, how he'd deflected praise by saying any decent person would have done the same. Then it was Jack's turn. He walked to the podium on unsteady legs, the journal clutched in his hands like an anchor. The auditorium fell silent. 500 faces turned toward him expectantly. His mouth went dry, and for a moment he considered sitting back down, making excuses, letting someone else speak Samuel's truth. But then he saw Liam in the front row, giving him an encouraging nod. Beside his son, Caleb held his grandfather's journal, and Sarah Foster watched with a kind of quiet faith that made Jack want to be worthy of it. Jack opened the journal to a page he'd marked with a slip of paper. His voice was barely above a whisper when he began, but the auditorium's acoustics carried his words to every corner. Samuel Foster wrote this on March 15, 2004. If someone finds this journal, I hope they understand what I've tried to say. Life is short and precious, and full of unexpected chances to matter. Don't waste them. Don't wait for permission to be kind. Don't let fear keep you from loving deeply, even when love means risking everything. Jack paused, looking out at the assembled crowd. He saw Mrs. Henderson from the hardware store, Jimmy Martinez from the auto shop, parents whose children played with Liam, teachers who had shaped generations of young minds. All of them waiting, listening, hoping for something that would make sense of loss and purpose. 3 weeks ago, I ran into a burning building to save a child, Jack continued, his voice growing stronger. People called me a hero, but I want to tell you something. I was terrified. Every step I took toward that fire, my body was screaming at me to turn around and run, but Samuel Foster's grandson was trapped in there. And something his grandfather had written in this journal gave me the courage to keep going. Jack flipped to another marked page. He wrote, "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else is more important than fear." That day, Caleb's life was more important than my fear. Just like every day, my son's future is more important than my past. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Jack pressed on, feeling momentum building like a wave. I came home from Afghanistan broken. I lost friends over there, good men who deserved to come home more than I did. I came back to find that my wife had died while I was deployed, that my son had been grieving alone while I was half a world away. For 2 years, I've been carrying that guilt like a stone in my chest, believing that I didn't deserve the second chance I'd been given. Jack's voice cracked slightly, but he didn't stop. Samuel Foster's journal taught me something different. It taught me that guilt is just love with nowhere to go, and that the people we've lost don't want our self-punishment. They want us to live fully, love deeply, and protect fiercely. He looked directly at Caleb, who was listening with the intense focus that only children possessed. Caleb, your grandfather left you more than just this journal. He left you a blueprint for how to live a meaningful life. He showed that heroism isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about showing up every single day, choosing kindness over indifference, choosing service over selfishness. Jack closed the journal and spoke from his heart. 3 weeks ago, I had a panic attack in front of most of you. My son had to talk me through it, and a 10-year-old boy had to explain to a room full of adults that being strong doesn't mean never falling down. I was humiliated. I wanted to disappear, to move somewhere else where nobody knew about my failures. The auditorium was so quiet that Jack could hear his own heartbeat. But Samuel Foster wrote something else in this journal. He said, "Show up. That's all any of us can do. Show up and trust that it's enough." So I'm here, showing up, telling you that heroes aren't perfect. Heroes are just people who keep trying, who keep caring, who keep believing that tomorrow can be better than today. Jack's voice grew stronger, carrying the weight of conviction. Samuel Foster was a hero because he mopped floors and fixed broken equipment and remembered every child's name. He was a hero because he chose to serve after losing everything that mattered to him. He was a hero because he showed up every single day for 30 years and made this school, this community, a little bit better just by being in it. Jack looked around the room, meeting eyes, connecting with individuals rather than addressing a crowd. We're all carrying something: grief, fear, regret, disappointment. Samuel's journal reminds us that carrying those burdens doesn't disqualify us from heroism. It's what qualifies us. It's what gives us the strength to reach out to someone else who's struggling, to show up when showing up is hard, to choose love over fear every single day. He held up the journal one final time. Samuel Foster's words saved my life, and through me they saved Caleb's life. But more than that, they reminded me that being a father, being a friend, being a neighbor who cares, that's heroism enough, that's legacy enough, that's love enough. Jack stepped back from the podium as the auditorium erupted in sustained applause. But he wasn't hearing it as artillery fire anymore. He was hearing it as acceptance, as community, as the sound of people recognizing truth when they heard it. As he returned to his seat, Caleb reached over and pressed the journal into Jack's hands. "Grandpa would want you to keep reading it," the boy whispered. "You understand his words better than anybody." Jack nodded, his throat too tight for speech. But as the service concluded and people began filing out, many stopped to shake his hand, to thank him not just for the rescue, but for his honesty, his vulnerability, his willingness to show them that heroes could be broken and still be worthy of love. Standing outside the school under a gray November sky, Jack felt something he hadn't experienced in 2 years. Peace, not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. Not the end of struggle, but the beginning of hope. Samuel Foster had been right. Showing up really was enough. Especially when you showed up as exactly who you were. 6 months later, the memorial garden behind Millbrook Elementary bloomed with spring flowers that Samuel Foster would have appreciated. Simple daisies and marigolds, sturdy plants that thrived without fuss. Jack knelt beside the bronze plaque that bore the janitor's name and the words, "He showed up every day." Liam sat cross-legged on the grass nearby, sketching in a new journal, one they'd bought together to continue the tradition Samuel had started. At 13 now, Liam had grown taller, his artwork more sophisticated, but his subjects remained the same. Everyday heroes doing extraordinary things through ordinary acts of love. "Dad, look at this one." Liam held up his latest drawing, a man teaching a boy to tie fishing line, both figures rendered with careful attention to the quiet concentration on their faces. Jack smiled, recognizing himself and Liam from their weekend trip to the lake. "That's really good, buddy. Your mom would have loved to see how talented you've become." It was the first time Jack had mentioned Sarah without the crushing weight of guilt that had defined his grief for so long. The pain was still there, it always would be, but it had transformed into something gentler, more like missing than mourning. "I've been writing about her in here," Liam said, patting his journal. "Memories I don't want to forget, stories you've told me. I thought maybe when I'm older I could write them all down properly, like Mr. Foster did." "I think that's a beautiful idea." Footsteps on the garden path announced Clara Moreno's arrival. She'd become a regular part of their lives over the past months. Dinner invitations that had grown into something that felt remarkably like courtship, if Jack was honest with himself. She carried a thermos of coffee and wore the kind of smile that made him remember what hope felt like. "How are my favorite men doing?" she asked, settling onto the bench they'd installed beside Samuel's memorial. "Dad's reading me the letter," Liam announced. Clara's eyebrows rose. "The letter?" Jack pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "Official stationery from the Millbrook Town Council. They want to name the new community center after me, the Jack Mercer Center for Service and Community." "That's wonderful." "I told them no," Jack said quietly. "Or, rather, I told them I'd accept on one condition." He stood and walked to the memorial plaque, running his fingers over Samuel's name. I said they could call it the Samuel Foster Center for Service and Community, with a small dedication to the rescue. Samuel spent 30 years serving this town. One moment of courage doesn't outweigh 3 decades of quiet heroism. Clara moved beside him, her hand finding his. He would have been proud of that decision. I hope so. Jack looked around the garden, where other families had begun arriving for the evening memorial service they held each month, a time for the community to gather, to remember not just Samuel but all the quiet heroes who made their town a better place. Caleb Foster approached with his mother Sarah, the boy carrying Samuel's journal as he always did. At 11 now, he'd grown into the role of the journal's keeper, reading passages aloud to younger children and adding his own observations about kindness and courage. "Jack," Caleb called out, "want to hear what I wrote yesterday?" "Always." Caleb opened to a page near the back, where his careful handwriting mixed with Samuel's faded script. I wrote, "My grandpa saved 3 kids in 1987, and Jack saved me in 2003. But the real saving happened in all the days in between. When Grandpa showed up to mop floors and fix broken things and make sure kids knew someone cared about them. Heroes aren't the people who do one big thing. Heroes are the people who do 1,000 small things and never expect anybody to notice." Jack felt his throat tighten. "That's perfect, Caleb." As the sun set behind the school building, more families gathered in the memorial garden. They came to remember Samuel, yes, but also to celebrate the lesson his life had taught them. That heroism lived not in grand gestures but in daily choices to care, to serve, to show up when showing up was difficult. Jack watched his son add another entry to his journal, documenting this moment, this community, this understanding that love could echo through generations, if people were brave enough to put it into words. Clara's hand was warm in his, and around them, children played while parents shared stories of small kindnesses that had shaped their week. Samuel Foster had been right about everything, Jack realized. Showing up was enough. Love was enough. Being human, broken, healing, hoping was enough. In the distance, the rebuilt school stood solid against the evening sky, its new fire safety systems and emergency protocols, a testament to lessons learned. But the real legacy lived in this garden, in these people, in the understanding that everyday heroes were all around them, wearing work clothes and worry lines and hearts full of stubborn, persistent love. Jack looked up at the first stars appearing overhead and whispered Samuel's final words, "Do not run from the fire within you. It is where healing begins." For the first time in 3 years, Jack wasn't running from anything. He was exactly where he belonged, with people who needed him as much as he needed them, writing the next chapter of a story that would continue long after he was gone. The story of showing up, the story of choosing love over fear, the story of heroes who looked remarkably like ordinary people doing extraordinary things with their ordinary days. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.